Hello, humans. Welcome back to the Schmozone podcast. This is episode number 65. Before we begin, this episode is brought to you by Fusion CBD products. For all of your CBD needs, if you have anxiety, trouble sleeping, heck, you just want to try something that makes your muscles feel good after intense workout, check out FusionCBDProducts.com. I love using their instant freeze. We're going to be sipping on their Fusion CBD sports water, which is always nice after a good strength and conditioning workout. You got to check them out. They got their gummies. I'm always thinking a million miles an hour, so it's always nice to try something to take the edge off. Use the promo code Schmo to get 20% off at checkout. And now, today's episode of the Schmozone, I'm really pumped for. I'm Dave Schmulenson, aka the Schmo. My co-host is
Helen Yee, sports.
And our guest today is the four-time Mr. Olympia, the one and only Jay Cutler.
I love that one and only.
You are the one and only. And before we kind of get started, I need to add a little fun fact. So me and Jay go way back to basically one of my first ever shows that I've literally ever done back in 2014. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on my show when I was first getting started. And I think I was probably a nervous wreck during the show. And I really appreciate, all your continued support and obviously love and support everything that you do as well.
You've progressed quite a bit. It's impressive.
Oh,
I can't believe that was 6-7 years ago.
Already.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I started with saying one and only because actually Helen loves to say the phrase one and only in the interview. So it was a kind of teaser for that, but also as a little teaser because I'm from Chicago and there is another Jay Cutler. He was a Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears. I don't think he's as popular as you, but I'm definitely well versed in both Jay Cutlers.
He's in the news. He's in the news quite a bit with the reality TV. And, for him, he was one of the highest paid. I think he was really talented. I mean, remember, I won the Olympia the year he came out for the draft. And I think he got drafted to the Broncos and then, of course, got traded to the Bears. But he was a big deal. So Sports Illustrated used to interview the two of us and back and forth. And it was a lot of, because of course the search the name Jay Cutler, I had jcutler.com. So there's a lot of comparisons they made, and I was at top of my game at the point when he was just coming into the pros.
How much did it annoy you to get confused for that Jay Cutler?
The only annoying part was the tweets I got on Sundays because the performance weren't the best, right? So I don't know, even Sports Center and all these guys would tag my Twitter. And even to this day, I get a lot of Instagram still of requests that are related to he.
We were talking before the show, just kind of, you moved here nearly 20 years ago, and the city, I mean, it's grown so much, right? Like the Raiders are here now, the Golden Knights.
I never imagined when I came to Vegas. I mean, I came to Vegas for the first time, I think, in around 98. They had the Mr. USA bodybuilding show here, and I came and I was living in Massachusetts at the time, and I think I was around 23 or so, and I just was amazed by the lights, and I never thought back then that I would ever live here, right? And eventually became a resident and accepted in the community and won the Mr. Olympia title here, and I finished, my career and reside here still to this day, which I love the city and the respect I get from all the people within.
Yeah, I'm 2 years into living here in Las Vegas, and I just love it. Obviously, one of those years was a pandemic, but I don't think there is a more light pollutant place on earth than Las Vegas, the Strip, per square mile. Like, it's amazing. You could see it from space, you could see it from everywhere, and I just feel like there's ample opportunity in this city. Yeah,
it's never ending, and I've seen the expansion. We talked about some of the freeways and some of the hotels that did not, the Wynn Hotel they didn't even have Encore back then, and the Wynn was being constructed during those times, and I saw a lot of places blow up and be destroyed and replaced. Back then, I mean, Rio was the biggest, and Mandalay Bay was being built, and that was the spot to be, you know.
And Henderson, I don't ever remember it stretching out like that far, like the M Casino in St. Rose area.
Yeah, it's crazy, all the real estate, and I came here for real estate, and I've seen the expansion of everything. It's just, you know, I never imagined the homes would be worth as much money as they are here.
And we're in the process of house hunting, and like we're looking at this area, Inspirada, and that I feel like 10, 15 years from now is going to be the next Henderson or Summerlin.
It's beautiful. I mean, Henderson has the lowest property tax in the whole country. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. But
did not know that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. How far can we take this back? Should we? Do you want to start somewhere?
Well, I guess you could start.
So, Jay, I guess every single person, every single high school male that gets into weightlifting, you know, they look at their Flex magazine, they look at something, they go to the gym for the first time. I'll never forget, like, I'm 15 years old, 16 years old, go to the Buffalo Grove Fitness Center, BGFC, and I have the same group of friends, 3 or 4 of us, that we just want to, you know, start working out, get big, you know, lift weights. You're one of the first faces I ever saw. I remember the first time I went to a GNC and I saw your beautiful mug on a Muscle Tech bottle. Like, how the heck did you get into muscle building from your background?
Man, it's a long story. So, you know, I started in central Massachusetts. I grew up on a farm. You know, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And I was actually about 12 when I picked up my first bodybuilding book. And I know in this era, like, we don't talk about the magazines as much. And, you know, I picked up a book and I saw this picture of Chris Dickerson, who was a former Mr. Olympia champion way back in the 70s, early 80s. And I was like, told my oldest brother, I said, man, I want to look like this. I was 12. And I started reading the books, and same thing. I walked in a GNC at 16 and bought my first bodybuilding instructional book called Beyond Built. It was by a guy named Bob Paris. And I just saw the physiques, and I was like, man, this is like perfect to me. And he was a good-looking guy. And I saw, you know, pictures of him on the beach in California. And, you know, coming from Massachusetts, like, that wasn't how we lived over there. So I had this vision of being in California. And I think a lot of the thought process and, you know, with lifting weights and seeing the books and these guys lifting on Muscle Beach, including back in the Arnold era, that kind of gave me, like, that mindset to be, man, I should try lifting weights. And luckily I developed quite a body working on the farm, and we actually did concrete work. My family business is concrete. My brothers still run that business. And I had a great physique even in high school. I was an athlete, one of the strongest kids in, you know, bench press, squat, deadlift. And I didn't even really lift weights. I just toyed around just for football. And I made this pact. I said, you know, I'm going to join the gym at 18. Joined the gym my 18th birthday, saved up $300 and joined this local Gold's Gym in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I started my journey as a bodybuilder and, you know, won everything pretty much until I got my pro card at 23 and started making a living at it.
So right away, when you first started, did you instantly know, like, wow, I can make this my career?
I had this thought that because what I saw in the books that bodybuilders were wealthy, because I saw, like, them posing with sports cars and, you know, hot girls on the side. Those were the magazine covers at the time. So for me, I had that, like, wow, this is how this really is. Little did I know, I mean, very few and far between make a career of it, because financially the shows didn't pay a ton of money, but the money was in the endorsements. And you had mentioned, you know, the supplements, and the supplement game has advanced so much. And even, you know, when you were probably a teenager looking at, you know, the GNC and the shelves of vitamins and supplements, like, that was 04, 5, 6, 7, like, those supplement market had exploded in sports nutrition. I don't know what year it was that you... No,
you're dead on. It was like 2006. I remember, like, the big thing back then for me in high school was creatine.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had Cell Tech, which was a product I endorsed. And, you know, I just thought, hey, you know what, these guys make money. And I remember people telling me there's no money in it. But I said, well, I'm kind of hard-headed. I said, I'll find a way, right? So I started early. I mean, I was advised by some really great people around me. And I started to, you know, demand high dollar if I wanted to be part of an endorsement type program. And I started doing mail order, where I would literally have one picture, one T-shirt, and I would handwrite letters to fans. This is prior to the internet. And all my articles in the magazines would have a P.O. box at the end. So I'd have people write me fan mail, and I'd send out like a sheet and say, if you want to purchase a picture for $10 and a T-shirt for $20. And that's how it all started. I mean, my whole branding started that way, and I would handwrite letters to the fans. And then, of course, when AOL popped up and you had dial-up, and I started doing emails, and I started a website in 2000, and, you know, you slowly started to transform into what today is social media.
You were building a brand before building a brand was cool.
Yeah, and I was getting booked for appearances and, you know, getting FaceTime with the fans. And I still think FaceTime, even to this day, is super important. Like, that's, if you asked, the biggest success of my career was definitely the FaceTime I spent at expos, guest appearances, traveling, which was very taxing because as a bodybuilder, like, we trained. I mean, it was 24/7. It's not like, you know, with fighting, for example, you say, okay, I'm dedicating, you know, 10 weeks to training. Like, it was all year, even though we might diet down and be strict for 4 months. Like, we never stopped because, as you know, if you stop lifting weights, like, a lot of that is water and, you know, what you do on a daily basis. So it just, you know, it's consistent. And that's, you know, where I excelled because of my work ethic growing up on the farm. And I was just really mindful of, like, I'm going to make a living at this.
So you're about 5'10". At your peak, you're like, what, 250, 260?
On stage, I was about 300 pounds off season. So we gained, you know, up to 40, 50 pounds of water, some body fat, but I stayed actually pretty lean. So, I mean, I won the Mr. Olympia title at 273 my first time. So it's an extreme weight for what the Mr. Olympia is at this point.
What was the extreme diet you had to follow?
Between 6,000 to 7,000 calories a day, 7 meals a day, 5 pounds of meat a day, 30 eggs for breakfast, 1,000 carbohydrates a day. I mean, you ate like a machine. You ate. I always have this saying, and it's quoted in our kind of arena, is, I ate for function, not for taste, because nothing tastes good when you eat super healthy, in my opinion.
I tell Helen that all the time. Like, like, everything's made in, like, abs, your body, like 80-90% of it's nutrition. It's all in the kitchen.
Yeah, I would say 80% if you wanted to. I hate putting percentages on things because, you know, we'd always say, well, what do you think, what percent were you on stage? And they'd say, oh, he was 95% or 90, and, you know, so many variables. But I would say, you know, 80% of what we do is the nutrition factor. So, like, I can sit here and name off, like, I ate this much red meat or whatever else, but it really, it's individual, meaning, like, every person, depending on how much weight you carry in muscle, you're going to need more calories.
So what would you estimate would be the weekly grocery bill to fit all of this type of planning?
It's hard to say. I always said I spent about $100,000 a year just on food.
Wow. But
in the beginning, you know, growing up in Massachusetts, I grew up in a very rural area, and I mentioned the farm. My brother still raises cattle for meat, and I would buy a whole cow at a time. So I would slaughter a cow, and I would have a whole freezer packed.
And what about, like, off season? Does it vary, like, calorie-wise, or what you eat?
Yeah, you have to cut down the carbohydrates when you train for a competition. And like I mentioned, 6,000 or 7,000 calories. I might cut down to like 4,500 for a contest over 16 weeks. But I think the main thing is when you have to lean down, like off season, I wouldn't do cardiovascular work. So I wouldn't do like treadmill. And this doesn't involve running. It's more like I do step mill or elliptical or just at a steady pace for like 45 minutes at a time. I do that twice a day. So for off season, I would do none of that. I would just be strictly weight training, and you'd get bulky. They call it off season. And then once you started prepping, you know, you'd incorporate cardiovascular, so you'd actually retain that muscle, cut the calories down some, but you'd basically starve yourself to take off the body fat but leave the muscle there. So the goal is every year to gain, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pounds of muscle, which is very, very difficult, especially as you're advanced. And that's why, like, I was so great at what I did, because out of the gate, I was a teenage national champion at 19, best in the country. I mean, I competed about 215. When I won my pro card 2 years later, I was 248 on stage. So I was able to gain a lot of muscle mass just because of my frame. And that allowed me to be, dominant on the stage because I would out-muscled people. And I was able to gather the condition, too, on top of that.
Wow, I have so much respect for what you guys do. And, for example, what about, like, now? Because you're still so fit and lean, like, do you still follow a pretty strict diet?
I do, actually. Now meal prep exists, which it did not back then. So, Trifecta, who's, involved in a lot of the different areas, like I'm a part of that program. So I, have meals sent out, and I still eat about 4 or 5 smaller portion meals a day. I've lost about 60 pounds. And I still train, probably 7 days a week. I do more cardiovascular work now instead of just weight training because I'm not trying to get bigger, but I'm just trying to maintain and tone what I have.
So something that's kind of gotten big in the past decade, since your heyday, I think CrossFit's kind of exploded. Mm-hmm. What do you make of the CrossFit workouts? Because I know that it involves a lot of Olympic type lifting, but I know the principles probably vary a lot from you. What's your take on kind of that side of things?
Yeah, so I think CrossFit has kind of spun off of kind of what we've done. It's a cross between powerlifting and bodybuilding, whatever. But, where we train with more repetition, so everything that I pick up or push is for 10 or 12 repetitions, where, CrossFit, it involves more agility training. So someone might have I think the injuries are more apparent actually in CrossFit, especially like ACLs, that kind of stuff, because you have to be pretty athletic too. And you can't be as bulky as bodybuilding. Like your weight can't be extreme. Like I'm talking about getting off season 300 pounds. Like that doesn't exist in CrossFit, right?
Kind of hard to do a muscle up at 300
Yeah,
pounds.
and the muscle ups, I mean, they're trying to do a lot of reps. So you got to be a lighter body weight to do that. Even, at 300 pounds, it was really hard for me to do pull-ups. Where I would have to do more exercise, like a lat pull down that, my body could actually be positioned and held down. But it's kind of worked off, and I love anything that's active, but I think bodybuilding, you basically don't want to create that crazy heart rate when you weight train because you'll burn too many calories. That's the biggest issue with bodybuilding is keeping the calories burning, but don't burn too much that you can't gain the mass.
What would you say are some of the pros and cons of when you started your career in bodybuilding to now during this social media era, and like you even mentioned where there's meal preps and whatnot as well?
I think, the misconceptions of bodybuilding, listen, there's, obviously steroids and all these things are apparent in today's society. And I think that, people look at the bodybuilders because they're so overblown in size, and they look at the supplementation, and listen, supplementation is advanced like crazy. But also the internet has a lot of false information on there. So you look at even the diets like the intermittent fasting, or everyone's on this binge eating cereal after they work out, like sugar cereal, because they try to spike their insulin levels. It was very simplistic back in my era, where you read in the magazines, and the funny thing is, and you can attest to this, you'd read a Jay Cutler article, and it would be I just mentioned, he buys a cow, and he sits around and cooks his meals, and everything's portioned out, and I weigh every ounce of meat, every carbohydrate, every amount of fat that goes in my body. And I literally take naps during the day, and my whole day was committed. I mean, I woke up at 6 and I was in bed at 9 every day. And I wasn't paid to necessarily do that because I was contracted, but I treated my job like it was like a real job, right? And I think that there's just a lot of misinformation out there that, the younger generation doesn't have the knowledge to know whether it's right or wrong.
And it's crazy too, because what you just said, when I was in high school, it was those magazines. We didn't surf the internet or look at these YouTube videos. I just remember I'd come home from school, I would take a nap before we went to the gym, because I'm like, oh, take a nap because your HGH will naturally produce, your human growth hormone levels will produce, and that's why some people like to work out, I guess, early in the morning too. That's when your testosterone levels are the highest. and we just live by like articles that you would write or other people would input, and that was the thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we talk about men and testosterone. Like, meal timing and how you train and your sleep patterns have a lot to do with your testosterone. And as a young kid, you're pretty much overblown with testosterone. But once you get over 25 or 30, like, that starts to dissipate. So
that's not talked about a lot, too. I feel like men and testosterone, it's going down as we progress as humans.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, like, I'll be honest, like, I have a supplement company, and, you know, my number one product that's sold is a testosterone, a natural booster with herbs and everything like that, allows people to, you know, get a steady testosterone because it's life. Like, you don't understand, you can't sleep if your testosterone's off, you can't function, and it's a problem that every male faces, especially with the stresses, the off sleeping pattern. Someone that's busy, like, it just wears you down.
100%.
Yeah, well, not saying I can relate to, but what can help? I mean, I'm sure there's men out there listening and watching right now that are curious.
I mean, I've read, feel free to chime in, like Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Body. I really like the things he's done. Like, even simple things like having almonds at night and stuff like that have really helped, I think. Like, there's little things here and there, and kettlebell workouts, like, I don't know.
Malnutrition is the biggest issue we face. It's just like the diabetes and the overweight with the young children, the pandemic. It's a bigger problem than you can imagine because people don't know nutrition. And I'm going to give an example. Like, when I first started bodybuilding, my dad was, I would say he was in his 60s. My oldest brother's, you know, over 60 years old, but my dad was about 65. And I remember I got into bodybuilding, and I was like, you know, I need to eat protein and carbs. And we'd have chicken that laid eggs, and I was eating all the eggs from the chickens. My dad was upset about it. And I'm like, I need my protein. And then I'd mention carbohydrates. And my dad says, what's a protein? What's a carbohydrate? He ate one meal a day, my dad. He was 135 pounds. But he didn't know anything about nutrition. And I think we don't learn a lot, even in like high school. And I don't know what it's like now, but no one ever taught us, like, okay, this is good and this is bad. I mean, you'd eat lunch at school, you'd eat breakfast. I've had donuts when I went to high school, graduating high school. Like, I would just eat like 4 donuts before I went to school. And to look back now, I mean, I haven't had a donut in years, probably since high school.
I think the biggest killer is this. Everywhere you drive, every corner, it's the fast food. The number one killer to me, it's not alcohol, it's not weed, tobacco, it's sugar. But sugar is too much money involved. The industries, the monopolies, way too much money. That's why they'll sponsor everything you stream or you watch TV. It's going to be an ad for fast food or anything like that. But because there's so much money involved with it, they don't want to tell you to, hey, you know, lay off on the Arby's, lay off on the Wendy's. They don't want to do that.
And it's cheap, right?
It's cheap, but I'll be honest, like, sugar is the worst killer there is. It causes plaque in the heart also, which people don't realize. So you drink those sodas and everything is loaded with sugars. Like, I mean, even some of the fruits, there's a lot of natural sugar in fruits. And that's why you just really need to learn about nutrition. So if you're asking for a simple answer, like, how can I perfect? I mean, it's mealtime. Eating a great breakfast is important. I don't care how busy someone is. Get up 30 minutes early, even if you just have some oatmeal and, you know, some egg whites or whatever. You can drink now, because we didn't even have pasteurized egg whites. Like, you can drink egg whites now, get your protein, but you should be eating every 3 hours portionate meals. So that's why meal prep is so important now. And it's just what we've been doing for over 20, 25 years is, you know, the meal prep we did at home, and now they offer that. And some of these companies are just, I mean, Trifecta is a multi-million-dollar brand, and, you know, it changes people's lives.
For sure.
Because 7-Eleven is not going to have the right meal prep for people, right?
Only those, pizzas to go and donuts?
Yeah, I think I remember as a kid I had Lunchables too.
Of course, I loved Lunchables. Those were some of my favorite.
Yeah, those were always fun, for sure. You're a big fan of combat sports too. I know you have a good relationship with Cody Garbrandt. You know, he didn't have the best result against Rob Font, but former bantamweight champion. You mentioned your father, 135 pounds. Cody fights at 135. And I think he's a trifecta athlete too.
He is, yeah. And Rob Font's actually from the area where I grew up.
Yes, New England Cartel.
I think he actually was from a place called Leominster, Mass. I saw somewhere, and I lived in Sterling, which is literally the next town over, where no one knows what that is. The only thing about Sterling, Mass. is Mary Had a Little Lamb nursery rhyme derived from there, for real.
Everybody
Fun
knows
fact.
that. That's everybody knows that.
Like Mary Sawyer lived in Sterling, Mass. So
for sure. But for Cody, man, what do you think? I have a good relationship with him. Where do you think his head's at?
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now?
we spoke after the fight, and he's just he took a day or two to kind of take everything in, and he knows what he needs to do. I think he's obviously facing probably the toughest division there is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we keep hearing about these up-and-coming people, and I mean, he ran through that whole division and, of course, won the title rather quickly, and and then he had a downswing a little bit with all the TJ fights, and I felt he was on the comeback a little bit. And I don't know if COVID and some of the injuries affected him a little bit. His training's been, I think, kind of up and down a little bit, but he does have that focus back, and I think, between camps, I know he's going to Jersey and he trains out in California. So, I think he's, this next one, whatever the next one is going to be, he's going to just recover a little bit, and he'll be back. I think he'll win another title, honestly.
So do you follow a lot of like the big fights?
I do. I used to go to a lot. Mm-hmm. I used to be invited to a lot of these, COVID's really sidelined a lot, but I remember going and seeing, Forrest Griffin, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture fights, everyone, Matt Hughes. I mean, I used to go to all those, and I followed it rather closely because they were really spread out then. Like, UFC fights weren't every week. Like, it's hard to keep up now because, and you guys covering that must be a lot more difficult because you have to say, okay, I'm going here this week. I mean, I feel it's kind of like bodybuilding. Like, now there's a lot of amateur shows. So I bounce a lot, and, I don't follow it as close because it seems like guys, there's very few that are like dominant. There's a few guys that are dominant in different divisions, but I love seeing the heavyweights especially. I mean, I've always been a heavyweight in what I did, so it's pretty crazy to see the athleticism in some of these guys.
And some of these heavyweights still aren't nearly as big as you. I mean, that's just how it is.
They're taller, I mean, it's... but some impressive. I mean, just that they have the speed and the ability that they have.
Oh, Francis Ngannou, like a freak of nature.
And I got to meet him when he was training out of the UFC, the new facility over there after last Olympia, like 2 years ago. We went over there to shoot for Trifecta, actually, and he was training there. And nice guy, I mean, but it's great to see him, on his way up, and coming, what he's done. It's pretty incredible coming from where he came and growing up and whatnot.
For sure. And to your point before, there is like a fight every weekend. This was the first time, though, in maybe years that they didn't have a fight on Memorial Day weekend. Mm-hmm. But we had to make a decision this week. UFC Fight Night, ironically, two heavyweights are headlining that card, Augusta Sakai and Jairzinho Rosenstrike, or the circus show, Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul. And I guess we chose Miami, so we're doing the red eye tomorrow night to Miami for that fight, and then going straight to Phoenix for UFC 263, Adesanya Vettori too. That's going to be a great card.
So is all the places opening up now? I mean, I know Florida's open, but
Florida's open, and Vegas is now completely open. Texas has been open. I think areas like New York, Chicago, they're slower to open up, those bigger cities.
Well, I saw that the Celtics had a full capacity, I think 17,000 at the Boston Garden, so that was great to see. But this Floyd Paul fight should be pretty interesting.
Yeah. What do you think of the Paul brothers?
I mean, they're great marketers. Yeah. I have a lot of people that run in circles with these guys, and it's pretty incredible what they've done. I don't follow their stuff as close as a lot of the people do, but it's a different demographic, so I think it's bringing a lot of eyes on the fight game that might not have been there. And I think because of lackluster boxing that we've seen over the years, which lately, I mean, there's been some pretty good champions. I felt like some decent boxing fights, but we don't see as much anymore. I mean, the UFC's definitely done a lot for the combat sports.
It's a pull and tug on both sides, because with the UFC and Dana White, he's going to make sure the best fighters fight the best fighters. In boxing, you have so many mouths to feed, so many different promoters, so that's why you don't see the best fighters fight the best fighters. And we talk about this all the time. Like, you got to make an Errol Spence,
Terrence
Crawford fight. But even though I'm really excited to see Errol Spence fight Manny Pacquiao out here in Vegas in August, cannot wait for that fight. Should be Manny's last fight. But I think that the politics open the door for the Paul brothers to come into the boxing world.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're attacking the UFC fighters, which means, okay, I mean, there's something there that Dana's done too in marketing this whole thing, and it's just incredible. I've watched him expand this thing from, kind of barbaric to, through all the media channels now, being, a crazy pay-per-view and, representing on, what who is that now? ESPN or show?
Yeah,
ESPN carries it. So, like, what he's done is amazing, and a lot of respect. I mean, Vegas is super, super proud to have someone like him in this space. But the Paul brothers, teamed up with Floyd. I mean, Floyd's the best at what he does too. I mean, you can talk about I remember watching him box, and they talked about this Pacquiao matchup forever. And it was lingering year after year. And then, of course, when it happened, everyone's like, wow, they're not at their prime. And
Pacquiao got knocked out.
But the money, like Floyd just knew that, okay, this is what it is. It's just like the McGregor thing, it's just, he just knows exactly when to pull it in.
No, but so they fought in 2015, but didn't Pacquiao get knocked out before they fought?
Mm-hmm,
so
yes.
They probably could have made even a little bit more money.
I think it was still one of the top pay-per-views, and listen, we talk about skewed numbers. I mean, listen, the McGregor thing was exciting, right? And I don't know how much Floyd played it, but McGregor looked okay in there.
Yeah.
Like, better than I thought, but I wonder if Floyd kind of...
maybe coasted, but yeah, McGregor, the first 4 or 5 rounds looked like the better boxer in there, but then obviously fatigue, and Floyd Money Mayweather, the best defensive boxer ever, did his thing, tired him out, TKO 10th round, right? They stopped in the 10th. But that's kind of where we're at with that. And
now Tyron Woodley's gonna fight Jake Paul.
Interesting.
It's smart, but something, I will say this from us who watch strategy and everything like that too. These MMA fighters, you have to worry about so much. You don't have to worry about just being punched in the face. You have to worry about the takedown and all the different aspects. So if you're a boxer, you go to the body, they're going to drop their hands, these fighters, because instinctually they could think about the takedown and stuff like that. You're going to leave openings and someone gets knocked out.
Yeah, and Woodley's a striker, so, I mean, he should be able to go in there and box.
Definitely striker, but a wrestling background. That's his base.
Well, they're not going to wrestle. We know that.
We know that. But, Woodley's coming off quite a few losses here, and you just got to wonder where the confidence is at. But I'm sure because it's, it's a YouTuber to him, and,
And the storyline with Ben Askren being his good friend and everything.
Point is this. Do you think Tyron Woodley, for the MMA community, he gets the job done? He puts him on his back. He stops the hype train of Jake Paul.
I don't know. I think this Paul guy's pretty good, man.
Yeah.
I know he's getting a lot of flack because, I feel like he's kind of like a McGregor character a little bit. Everyone tries to be McGregor now, right?
Oh, for sure. And he definitely has the
And
inspiration.
McGregor just rolls with it. I don't know. This guy's just so on point all the time.
But here's what I love about it, too, because he was getting called out by Tommy Fury, the younger brother of the heavyweight champion Tyson Fury. If I have to be politically correct, the WBC and lineal heavyweight champion, because Anthony Joshua has belts too. But he calls out Tommy Fury, who's like, what? He's young in his career, 5-0, 6-0, but fighting, I guess, tomato cans. And he was going to fight this guy who was 0-14 as a professional boxer. Jake Paul calls him out, and I guess Frank Warren and his Queensberry promotions who represent Tommy Fury, they went on and said, no, he was never going to fight this guy. And then this guy who he's supposed to fight comes on and says, Jake Paul, I want to fight you. You ruined my payday with Tommy Fury. But it's basically he's pointing out the bullshit in boxing. It's that people pad their records early on in their career. So the way that the Paul brothers are thinking, or specifically Jake, because Logan, he's just going for Floyd Mayweather, and who knows if he boxes again after this. He's thinking like, look, I'll pad my record with MMA fighters or NBA stars or other YouTubers. I don't have to do it the traditional boxing way. Why not?
Yeah, I'm with that. I don't hate the guy for it, because in this day and era, it's like, they're leaving with big paychecks, right? And yes, it's dangerous. I mean, every time these guys go in the ring, no matter if it's boxing or if it's MMA or whatever, bare knuckle fighting, I mean, there's always risks. And, but I love to see guys make money. I love to see the success, and I love to see the underdogs win. I battled that for a long time in my career. So sometimes when, there's that doubt, I mean, it's just like Logan fighting Floyd. He's a lot taller, he's a lot heavier, and Floyd's a little older than he was when we saw him last. But man, he's on point, always.
Didn't you have to follow Ronnie Coleman's shoes too?
Yeah, I mean
that's
who's the greatest ever. I mean, I'll go on record. I mean, we all sit here and look at bodybuilders and who we admire, and this guy was my idol. So for me to come up and have him as my idol and then become a rival, and then of course like have to beat him, and when I did beat him, I felt bad, because not only did I beat him, I beat, he was going for record number 9 at the time, which is, there's only been 8 victories straight by 2 champions, and he and Lee Haney had, each 8 wins. So I held that from that happening. He's going to break that record, and I was the first guy to defeat Mr. Olympia on stage. Never been done in history, still to this day. And to have, all those I was second 4 times to him, where most guys would have given up. It seemed like there was a curse of the second place Mr. Olympias. If you go back to like Rich Gaspari and, Kevin Levrone, Sean Ray, all these guys, they never end up getting the title. Flex Wheeler, like they all pursued that title and they fell back, where I was one of the ones that was able to leap forward and actually win the title. And to do it in my hometown of Vegas and like have everyone behind me. And by that point, you as the underdog, you build up a huge momentum. And it took me weeks to realize that it happened. And, to this day, it was still one of the greatest moments in our sport history. And probably 50 years from now will be recognized even further. It seems like the further I get away from my career, the more respect I get.
It's funny how that works. It's people just don't appreciate things in the moment, and then when they don't have it anymore and time progresses, like the nostalgia kind of settles in and people start to appreciate it more.
Yeah, because, the kids now on social media, like a lot of it's not real, but in the magazines, someone like you who read the books, like they displayed us as like superheroes and superhuman, and everything was in a perfect world, right? And we all had all our stuff behind the scenes. It wasn't, life's never perfect for anyone, no matter what level they're at, right? So when someone makes you out to be perfect, it puts a different aura when people meet you or follow the career, right? And the unfortunate thing about social media, like you can admire someone and then you start following, you're like, I don't know if I like this person.
It's weird because Helen and I are kind of in the beginning stages of really being recognized by fans. Like we weren't just in these UFC fights in Jacksonville and Houston, people posing for photos and stuff like that, and like shoving their phone in the face, Schmo, do it, how we doing and stuff. And I can't imagine living a life for decades, like probably how you have to live, where people just pose or they look at you as this superhuman, and we're all human. We all put our pants on one leg at a time. But for you, I mean, for Suits, that's a different story, I assume. But, I just don't know how. It's hard for me to grasp that whole concept.
I mean, with success comes a different mindset.
Yeah.
So as you progress, I mean, if you told me at 18 when I started I was a shy country kid, and I remember standing on stage and shaking, and I was winning. I remember guest posing, being nervous as hell up there, like, oh my gosh, and I was paid to be there because I just didn't have the experience. And then I'm starting to get behind a microphone and have to do it, on stage, and I was only in front of, 500 people or 1,000 people, to eventually, when you're on the Olympia stage doing speeches, with 10,000 people, and then you're going to seminars and you're traveling worldwide, and then of course you get behind a microphone for social media and you got millions of people, you learn to adjust, and then you realize that, wow, I'm actually changing people's lives. And what I look back on the accolades of what I did, right, all these awards and titles, and we can talk for days about that, but like it's the people now that appreciate you for kind of the message that you provided and the motivation. I talk about the underdog and, when I lost. And, remember, I won the Olympia and lost it, came back to win it. No one's ever done that in history either. So for me, it's incredible to change, you change people's lives. And listen, 75%, 80% of the people that come to see me today, I go this weekend to Idaho for an appearance, they are people with weight challenges. These aren't people that, I want to be the next Jay Cutler bodybuilder. These are people that lost 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 pounds because they picked up an article, whether it was in a book or social media, or they read something that I said that changed their lives and said, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and make a change in my life. And they did it.
At what point of your career did you think to yourself, you know what, I'm successful, I've made it?
I think when I won the Olympia, because the day you start, I never had this vision of being Mr. Olympia, because that's the pinnacle. You don't go any bigger than that in my sport. And I didn't realize I could win it until the first time I got second to Ronnie Coleman. It was controversial. I actually was I could have won that contest if the judging was correct. I still call it the judging because I was ahead in the pre-judging. And when I won the Olympia, everything flashed for me, the whole journey from 12 years old to 16 to going in GNC, and then 18 competing for the first time, and then of course getting the pro card and all the second to last at my first Olympia. I was almost dead last. And I realized wow, I've reached what I had set out to do. So what's now? What am I working for achievement? And the truth is, I got to the top, and the amazing thing, and I'm very transparent, I kind of said, this is it. I expect more. And it just shows my mentality where I'm never satisfied with what I do. And I've said this a million times in interviews, and that's the amazing thing about my life is no matter what I do or achieve I'm never satisfied. It's never enough.
We both feel that same way. And Earl Nightingale in the 1950s was a salesperson and then used radio at fireside chats. And I think you can YouTube it for anyone listening. It's called The Strangest Secret. It's 2 parts. But he defined success as the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. And if you break that down and what that means, it's progressive, it's constantly changing, and it's worthy, goal, or ideal. So you always have this mindset that you are working for something, and it's meaningful enough to you to constantly go after it. Regardless if you get there or not, you have a purpose and a meaning to go out and get after it. And it's something I always remind myself to this day.
I think that's what makes someone great, is their vision never stops. So when you asked me wow, I'm successful, I think I realize it today, a lot more than I did even when I won, because, here I am retired 8 years and still in demand like I am, and traveling the world, and people still stop me left and right more than ever. Social media has blown bodybuilding up way past the magazines you could ever imagine.
That's what I wanted to get into, with social media, and we're in 2021 right now, walk me through the steps of what it would be for someone who's starting to train and getting into competitions and being a bodybuilder, and how it's different now versus when you were going
You don't need the accolades anymore. There's so many personalities, and the people that can get on social media and have a message to the people that follow them, and all you gotta say is, I like this guy. I mean, it's kind of like when you pick up a book and you read, Jay Cutler buys a cow, or, he goes and, his family is youngest of 7 kids. It was relative to a lot of people, right? Growing up in Central Mass, 6,000 people in my town. Remember, majority of people aren't growing up in Venice Beach, California, and seeing Arnold at the local deli, you know what I mean? So for us, it was when I got to recognize, I saw Keanu Reeves at Gold's Gym Venice, or Kobe Bryant, or, all these guys, Magic Johnson was there, and I remember being oh my gosh, I never imagined I'd see the guys I saw on TV, and it was amazing. And I went furniture shopping one day and saw Bruce Willis there with his daughter, and I was he was my hero. I watched Die Hard about a million times, you know, and honestly, what I started looking at when I began bodybuilding, you know, besides those books, was Sylvester Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme. So when I got to meet both those guys, and the funny thing, both those guys said to me, I'm a fan, meaning they were my fans. So I was totally blown away, because here I am at 12 years old watching Rocky IV, and, you know, Rocky beat up, you know, the Russian, Ivan Drago.
She still has not seen the Rocky movies. It blows my mind. And
how are you even covering combat sports? And
David, come on, whatever. I watched it without you that day.
Oh yeah. Oh, that day. No, I think I made
You
her
were on
see.
vacation.
I think I made her at least see the training scene from Rocky IV.
I've
Unbelievable.
seen, like, bits and pieces.
Because we have interviewed Dolph Lundgren before,
Yeah.
and I mean, like,
he's
Rocky.
big in the, he's big into bodybuilding arenas. But Stallone had a supplement company, and, you know, I won the Arnold Classic, which was Schwarzenegger's show. It's second biggest title in professional bodybuilding, and we're in Columbus, Ohio, and I was going to eat at Morton's after. This was 2004, actually.
Excellent steakhouse.
And I walked in, and this guy came running, hey, Jay, someone wants to talk to you. And I walked over to a limo, and out stepped Sylvester Stallone, and he says, Jay, I'm a huge fan. And at the time, he was doing The Contender, like shortly after in Las Vegas. They had that show. You probably don't remember, but he had a boxing show, and it was like whoever could get to the final rounds, whatever. So he invited me to come, and it was just amazing, because this is the guy that I idolized, right? In a similar situation, I was outside Gold Venice one day, and I was walking across the parking lot. It was very quiet there, and I hear this guy, Jay, you know, and all of a sudden I turn around, I see this guy coming towards me, and as it gets closer, I'm like, oh, shit, that's Jean-Claude Van Damme. And he stuck his hand out, and he says, I'm a huge fan. So for me, like, watch Bloodsport and those kind of movies and see, like, this guy, like, it was just incredible, you know. So you want to talk about when you know you made it, like, that was actually a moment. So I kind of, if I said I won the Olympia, I knew I was successful. But when those people recognize you, it's pretty incredible.
Do you ever feel pressure, for example, of knowing, like, anytime you walk out the door, you're going to be recognized, and to always, like, even if you have a bad day or a good day, it's like, you know, if a fan comes up to you and...
I love it. You know why I love it? Because it's always positive. No one ever stops me and says anything negative. That's, which is a crazy thing, because I get more questions like, oh, do people ever, like, talk about, like, how muscular you are and this and that? And maybe I've fallen back now, so I look, you know, I still look somewhat the part, but not like I did when I was 300. But it's always a positive message, and it makes me feel good that I could impact people. You know, coming from where I come from, man, it's like, you know, like I said, 6,000 people, youngest of 7 kids, wondering. I had the same thoughts that most kids, am I ever going to be successful in anything? What I remember at the crossroad at 18, when I joined the gym, I was going to school to be a police officer. I studied criminal justice and got my degree doing that. But my family wanted me to work in the concrete, and I wanted to do something different. And I found the gym. And in those 2 hours I spent in the gym, I trained from 8 to 10 at night, every night, because I went to school during the day, and I worked a part-time security job, making $5 an hour. My paycheck was $150 a week, working 40 hours. I was lost in those weights, and I felt no pressure whatsoever. And that's why I fell in love with bodybuilding, because back then it was a stress reliever. And you can probably relate to this somewhat. Like, your mind gets in the weights, and it's hard to explain unless you know it. Like, you just forget about everything.
Well, here's the thing, and I have to interject. Every morning, he told me, ever since we first started dating, he's like, I need to get a workout in every morning, and you can't interrupt my workout. It's like the me time. And let's just say I've accidentally messed up and interrupted him before, and I won't do it again.
You need your me time.
It's a meditation.
Yes.
It's hard to, it doesn't make sense, but I walk my neighborhood. I have a community that has 20 homes. So I have a circle. I can't go outside my gates because people stop me. Like, I go on the main roads, and vans would stop, and it would interrupt my meditation. So I stay in my circle, and my neighbors think I'm a little crazy because I walk like 20 times around. But I always post on social media my meditation, or I ride my longboard. Like, I actually ride a skateboard, and I find that time is like, it's just, it makes me absent from anything that I have going on. And of course I have stresses, but the gym is still my savior. I mean, I train 7 days a week, which is totally against protocol if you're trying to be a bodybuilder, because you need recovery. And I still train 7 days a week.
My rule of thumb is sweat every single day. So whether it's weight training, whether it's plyometrics, whether it's yoga, whether, it's a jog, it doesn't matter what it is, sweat every single day. And that is kind of what makes me feel great. But, you are such an inspiration for even just my upbringing to becoming the Schmo. I mean, there's so many places to start, but I used to, just quick story, as I used to intern for free at Comcast Sports at Chicago. When I graduated college, the path was to get into break a top 150 market, to be a traditional sportscaster, weekday news anchor, weekend sports anchor, try to work your way up to Bristol, Connecticut, ESPN. Far from the dream now. I wouldn't change the path where it is now, but I picked up 2 degrees in personal training. By no means understand fitness, but by no means am I an expert. I didn't study kinesiology. I studied broadcast communications, but I picked it up so I can make money. And that's where my sanctuary. And at the time I was doing triathlons, I was training like women that were doing running and races and different types of exercises. But that's how I made money, by going to what I was comfortable with in the gym. And I did that for 6 months before I moved out to California to pursue the career that I'm in now. But to your point, like, I find the fitness world like literally my savior, and like it was something I could always fall back on. And for 6-7 years I made sure I kept those degrees, so if all else failed I could still train people on the side.
Yeah, it sounds like you're diversified though, because you mentioned the different facets of like what you do. Like I did Pilates, I did kettlebell training. I was one of the few bodybuilders that stepped outside the circle of the monotonous lifting weights, right? Because eventually, like, the routines, I mean, how many times can you curl something or bench press, right? So I started doing things to work the core. And listen, I watched the advancement of all these things. Like kettlebells back when they didn't exist. Pilates didn't exist. I mean, yoga, no one was doing yoga. Maybe they were in ancient times or whatever, and it was just underneath everything. I remember, we talk about foods. Sushi didn't even exist. Like, yeah. Where I grew up, you never heard of sushi. There were no sushi restaurants. And, I moved to California. It was like culture shock of like everyone eats sushi. And I'm like, man, people eat that raw fish like that. And, you would you adapt to all those things. But it really, it put myself in a different realm. And even my massage, my tissue therapy sessions, like I'd spend 6 hours a week working with therapists between dry needling, neuromuscular therapy. And I believe that all goes into developing your body too for recovery, and of course keeping the muscles pliable, because as you build more dense muscle mass, your muscles get tighter. So stretching is important. I had a stretch coach 3 days a week. I did a lot of sauna work to flush lactic acid. People want to know what makes you so sore. You want to try to get rid of all that damaged tissue. So there's just so much that goes into in today, like we talked end to end about nutrition. Like now all these fighters and all these people trying to be in shape, not only, with their muscle tone, but also recovery and, conditioning. Like it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, the ice baths and everything. And now there's all those massage guns, like the Tim Tam.
Yeah, cryotherapy.
Cryo.
Like, which I hate, by the way. Like, I hated cryotherapy. Like, I did it a couple times. Of course, everyone and their brother called me, hey, do this. And I'm sure the fighters use it a lot, but I just didn't like being that cold for, even though the recovery's great.
I think the ice bath's much worse than cryotherapy.
We did ice baths even in high school football, 1990, 91,
Yeah, that's true.
But what did you think about Pilates and yoga?
I liked the Pilates. I never got into the yoga, even though I wouldn't be afraid to try it today. But the Pilates, I had a reformer at home, and I had a Pilates instructor. So, and it's actually where we interviewed for the first time, you and I, like that building. I remember specifically, like she was upstairs there. And, it put me, it was so difficult for me in the beginning because, to have the body like and work the core, especially when I was used to lifting weights and I thought, I'm buff and I can do all this, and I felt like kind of weak on that thing. But it changes bodies. Like I know women that phenomenal bodies with just on reformers.
Yeah, my sister's a Pilates instructor, and she's ripped and can like do these different handstands and everything.
Because you don't understand when you have to incorporate your core like that, it's so much calorie burning. Yeah. That's why these performers you see in Cirque du Soleil or these shows, like you see them in the gym and these bodies. I remember seeing all these guys in Vegas. I'm like, man, these guys could win bodybuilding contests. And this is year round what they look like, but that core work that they're doing to do all that dynamic of what they do is just incredible.
And to go full circle, at least he's the starting quarterback for the Bears right now. Andy Dalton, I know he's big in Pilates. His wife, I think, is a Pilates instructor. She's big in Pilates, but I remember seeing a whole special on Andy Dalton doing Pilates.
I wish more athletes would talk about like their protocol. It's almost like I did a lot of interviews in the books because it didn't exist social back then, but and I'd like to talk about it because I wasn't afraid of someone going and doing it because it was a lot of work and it took time and it took a lot of financial responsibility. And, I was prepared to spend every dollar that I ever won at the Olympia. I was winning $200,000 back then at the Mr. Olympia, and I spent every dollar. I mean, talk about the food was $100 and, between tissue work and, I'd spend $4,000 a month just on massages, So it was just crazy. Like, I was willing to put every dollar back in. And today, at my age, I'm not restrictive of anything that I do. And I believe a lot of it is dedicated to the commitment I had in doing all those other extra things other than just pounding weights.
For what you just said, too, about doing your morning walk and the longboard and the meditation, I'm surprised you haven't gotten to yoga. And you talked about stretching because with yoga, it totally checks the boxes of the meditation and the stretching and definitely the core strength.
He does it once a week, and he's like begging me to do it. So I finally joined a yoga studio. I've only been there once, but it feels nice.
Do you do hot yoga or?
I've done it all, but since this pandemic, it's actually kind of funny. I'd love to get your opinion on this. I've had a phase of trying all different types of exercises. I went and found at the beginning of the pandemic these old P90X DVDs with Tony Horton and stuff. So back in 2004, he did this 90-minute yoga session where he does 15 minutes, first 10 minutes it's intense, the next 15 minutes it's all of the static poses and long form stretching. So for 90 minutes once a week I dedicate myself to that. But to what you said, I've done the hot yoga and man, you're just sliding and slipping everywhere, man. It's just way too
Let
hot.
me ask you this though, so mentally it's great, right?
Oh yeah.
But physically, has it taken anything away from you, like pain or restriction that you've noticed?
I think it's totally helped with my flexibility, and I think it's really helped with low back support. Like with what we do all the time, we are sitting or standing for long periods of time. So if I find myself, if I'm not doing yoga once a week, my low back is going to tighten up in those situations when we're always on our feet or always sitting and editing a piece of content. But it's definitely helped me so much. I'm so much more limber. Like I can touch my toes and put my whole palms to the floor, and that's evolved over time. It's definitely made me so much more flexible. Can I say it's transitioned to better gains in the gym? I can't say that. No, but that's not what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for the meditation and just making my body feeling great.
Yeah, a lot of the reason I started too, just to point out, is the long plane rides. I was booked every weekend. So if you asked me on 52 weeks a year, I would travel 36 to 40 weekends out of that 52 to do appearances, and that would involve planes. And sitting down in a seat it's the worst thing for you.
Oh yeah.
So I would get super tight, and that's why I think I needed that, especially after, say, if I did legs on a Friday and I caught a flight, and you're sitting there for 6 or 8 hours sometimes, or you go on these overseas flight. It was just, if I flew business or whatever, it's a little easier. But those positions they lock you down.
That's what we always talk about, just the flights.
The flights. We're going to have to do the cross-country flight, but then we did 4 different flights to Abu Dhabi on Fight Island in the past year to cover the UFC. That's 15, 16 hours each way, and that's brutal. That's definitely brutal.
Yeah, I was there for the first Poirier Khabib fight. I was in the arena.
Oh, you went.
I went.
242?
Yeah, 242.
I was there for the first. They had it in a tent. It was like a tent.
Yeah, they said it was really hot in there.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Like, it was crazy. And we had an appearance around that time, and the royal family actually invited me to the, I ended up in a box and watched the fight, and it was pretty crazy. And, that was, I got to see that for the first time, and that was the only time I ever saw Khabib fight. I didn't go to the McGregor fight when it was here.
Would you consider Khabib the greatest of all time?
I mean, record-wise, yeah. I mean, I'd love to see him come back, though.
What about John Jones?
Yeah, I think he's legit. I mean, I don't know if he's going to move up to heavyweight. I think he's finding it a little more difficult. He's in the bodybuilding arenas a lot, though, because he was sponsored by one of the companies.
And that's the situation. You're the perfect guy to ask this. Maybe this will be one of the final things we ask you. But John Jones, he's making this move up to heavyweight, but he's having trouble keeping on the weight. He's naturally.
It's all eating, yeah. It's all eating.
He's having trouble. But he wants to do it, but I think from his most recent post, he wants to push back on time. Like, he doesn't want to do it necessarily this summer. He might take up to a year. Like, if you're John Jones, like, what would you do to keep on the weight, but good weight, muscular weight, and to keep his speed?
He's just got to keep training. He's got to, stick with the. I mean, we talk about not burning the calories, so you got to find the happy medium between combat fighting training versus, like I mentioned, everything 10 repetitions and, certain rest periods, and the food consumption has to be tremendous when you're trying to put on weight. But I think it's a smart ploy, actually, because I think he's going to get paid more money the longer this thing drags on, and if Francis can retain. I know he's fighting the Derek Lewis. Yeah, which, listen, he's no slouch at all. But if Francis can retain, that could be the biggest payday we ever see in UFC history.
He's got Richard Schaefer from the boxing world now advising him, but what happens if Francis ends up fighting Derek Lewis, and the other side of the coin, Derek Lewis is the heavyweight champion? Do you lose monetary leverage if you're John Jones?
I don't think so. I think it's, we talk about the Manny Floyd thing. Yeah. It's still John Jones. Like, if you ask the all-time greats, I mean, listen, I watched Anderson Silva win everything. Like, he ran that streak. I don't know what his streak was, but it was at the time. I mean, I watched George St. Pierre, who was unbelievable, and I mean, Matt Serra beating him was like a fluke in my opinion. Like, of course, he came back and won it, and then stepped away, and he just was all around a great fighter. So we can talk about, to the end of the day, it's kind of like talking bodybuilding, where I think we can agree that Ronnie Coleman was like the best physique, but they'll talk about other greats too. I think Jones, like, he just comes, I mean, the whole family's just, they're beasts, right? And I think he's smart to hold out. I don't know if Dana's going to pay them what they want, but I don't know what that number is. There's too much social media number game out there, right? We don't
Twitter.
Yeah, what is his real number? Like, the guy wants 10 million or something. He'll get 10 million bucks.
They're going to have to do something where not everybody's happy, but everyone tolerates it. And it's definitely going to break the current mold that the UFC has for their payouts and their pay-per-view structure.
I'll spend the 60 or 80, or I don't care what it is. I'll spend the $100 to watch it.
Maybe that's what it is. You just may make an extra $20 bump just for this fight. If normally it's 60, 70, you make it 80, 90, and just give that to John Jones and Francis.
Exactly.
Listen, I'm a fan of all these guys. I mean, Francis is, I wouldn't want to fight Francis, but John's a smart guy. I think he can figure it out.
The guy I wouldn't want to fight is Shaq. Him next to Francis, he's like, it looks like a little kid. Even though Francis did lift him up.
He's not going to get into the
but he was, but he did, he plays around, and he's a police officer talking about the criminal justice.
Shaq, there's nothing Shaquille O'Neal can't do.
I agree.
I swear to God. I mean, the guy DJs. He's on every commercial there is.
He's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good broadcaster.
Good broadcaster.
Yeah.
The first time I ever blew up and people knew who I was, I interviewed Dana White, and right before I interviewed him, because he invited me to the office, it was after I did this viral thing. I asked him question press conference. This huge guy walks in. It's Shaquille O'Neal. So I met Shaq the first time. Shake his hand. Couldn't even see my hand. His hands were just ginormous. He sits down, eating chicken wings, and watches this interview. And I'm like, fuck, this guy is living the life. Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a Celtics fan. So when I moved to California in '90, I had to become a Lakers fan because that was like the Kobe, Shaq years where they did like the 3 years or whatever. And everyone would drive around with their Lakers flags out the windows. And I mean, Shaq was he was a beast back then. And I had to become a fan of that. And, his agent actually, or whatever, his in Vegas, Perry Rogers, and then he had the TV show. And like Shaq's done it all, man.
He's got his chicken shack here. And actually, he did go back to your Celtics. I know it was at the end of the career. He played there for 1 year.
Yeah.
Wasn't meaningful. But I only lived in L.A. for 7 years. But I could never be a Lakers fan because I grew up in the 90s and I had the greatest basketball player. Yeah, the greatest basketball player of all time, and Michael Jordan.
Not LeBron. I'm just
or
kidding.
Larry Legend. He's up there, but to me the GOAT's always
it's funny to talk about Jordan. I remember the first kid that came in with the original Jordans. It was '85. They launched those shoes, and I remember the kids paid $100 for the shoes, and you were buying shoes for like $15 back then. And I'm like, man, this kid must be rich. Like, he's wearing these Jordan 1s. And today I have a collection. People follow me for my shoe collection, and Jordan 1s are like my go-to shoe. I used to wear designer shoes everywhere, and now I wear out as like my jeans and my 1s, because there's so many variations now. It's crazy.
It's nuts.
You're rocking some right now, too.
No,
right?
I'm actually, I'm not my Jordan 1s, but my Air Maxes. I'm an Air Max fan too.
All great things. We really appreciate you hopping on the Schmozone. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave?
No, man. I appreciate you guys. I'm following what you do, which is great. I mean, I'm tuning in, and I'm on YouTube every morning. I don't watch television, so I do watch.
YouTube's the new TV.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is, and I do a ton of YouTube, content myself because that lets people inside your personal life a little bit. But as you progress and you guys continue, it's great to watch. And I would just watch your stuff a week or whatever ago when Cody did the interview with you, and before the fight. And I remember you were just starting out when we did our first one, so it's pretty amazing.
Oh my gosh, thank you again. I
think you covered my bodybuilding show here.
I did. I actually wanted to bring that up, and I'm glad you did the Jay Cutler Desert Classic.
Yes, we're in year. We just did 10. It should have been 11 because we canceled in the pandemic year. So this was our 10th.
Congratulations!
One. Yeah, we have it at South Point now, and I do 4 now. So I do Virginia, and I do 2 in Boston, and I do 1 in Las Vegas. So that's one thing now is I get to create these platforms for the athletes to compete on the amateur level. We actually have women's pro bikini in our one here in Las Vegas too. So it's just great to be transplanted in Las Vegas. I really hope you stay. I really hope you like Vegas a lot. I mean,
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
we're here.
You've been here. You've been here for a minute.
Yeah, born and raised.
So it's just Vegas is where it's at.
Fastest growing sports city in the world. We're going to have a pro Major League Baseball team here. And well, what I heard is there's right now a rule. My younger brother is a baseball savant. I think I said this in last week's episode, but basically there's a rule where you can't have a major league team within 15 miles of a minor league team, and we have the AAA team for the A's right in here, the Aviators. So they just have to
Summerlin or something, right?
They have to move some things around. It's in Summerlin, exactly. They have to move some things around, but I think the A's would come here. No, this city's booming.
The Raiders have changed the whole aura of Las Vegas.
100%.
Yes.
The Knights also. I mean, the Knights have done amazing.
Definitely.
I lived at Mandarin Oriental, which is now Waldorf Astoria, and I remember living there, and the T-Mobile didn't exist, and of course the Raiders Stadium wasn't there. And to imagine now, like we drive. My office is right near the Raiders Stadium, so I drive by every day, and I watch that thing being constructed, and I'm like, as it grew and grew and grew, and I'm like, I still wake up on a daily basis and say, wow, I live in Las Vegas.
I do. Amazing. I pinch myself too because 3 years ago I didn't know life existed outside of the Strip in Las Vegas. I didn't know, but I went to college in Tucson, Arizona at the U of A, and this feels a lot like Arizona. Like Henderson feels like Scottsdale, but this is better. No state. I mean, I don't want to get people moving.
Yeah,
here.
I was about to say the traffic.
It's
gotten worse.
And I can deal with the heat. And I know you might be able to agree with me here, but I'd much rather be hot, like 100 degrees, than sit in 15 degrees and shovel snow and off my car and scrape the ice to move my car in the morning.
Yeah, us more towards the East Coast and mid. I think we understand that a little more.
Yeah.
It's funny because the California people look at Massachusetts and they're like, oh my God, the Four Seasons and the snow, and you grew up in the best. And listen, don't get me wrong, I had 4 seasons and I loved it because I was able to experience a lot. But we all have a choice. And in '99, I made that choice and I migrated west, and I'm never going back.
So I said the same thing. Yeah, 100%. I might get a little homesick in the fall because, fall, the football season, the leaves changing and everything like that. But the weather, no, this is...
And now we have a football team, and, we all have it all. I mean...
And plus, when you wake up and the West Coast and the games start at 10 a.m., it's the best thing ever I discovered in college. You don't look at football the same.
Yeah.
For sure.
West Coast is the best coast.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We'll have to do it again, but the next time we do something, we'll both interview you, and I want to be the schmo. I think it'll be good.
As long as you want to play your part.
Of course.
He basically becomes a completely different person.
I know. I see the.
Yeah.
I see the.
So isn't this kind of weird, right?
Well, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know. When I called you the Schmo, I was like, okay, shit. Should I have said that?
No, I like that. I like that.
I mean, he called you Schmo too, but
yeah, that's true. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate you very much. We'll do it again sometime soon. Episode 65 of the Schmozone podcast. We are out.